guys, welcome back to my channel, Hey Brittany. So I'm going to be doing a binge watch Brittany series where I'm just going to be covering all of the TV shows that I've been watching. And so for today's episode, we have Powerverse. We have Power Book 2, Ghost. So prior to watching Power Book 2, I had watched the OG Power show that comes out on Stars. It was a really great show. I don't think I watched all 6 seasons, but by the end of it, I pretty much knew what happened. So just to do a quick recap, we have Ghost St. Patrick, who is a drug dealer. We have Tommy, who's basically his partner and associate in crime. And then for Ghost, we have his family, Tasha, Yaz, Tariq, and then his sister Raina. And so basically what happens to their family is that Tariq kind of gets Raina killed because he's messing around with some another drug dealer named Ray Ray, and she ends up getting shot. We have Ghost cheating on his wife with Angela and breaking his family apart. And then pretty much by the end of that, we have Ghost killed by Tariq, and this is supposed to be covered up. And then we kind of move into Power Book 2. And so as we're going into Power Book 2, we have Tariq, who is pretty much the most hated character on that show. And so I did some research prior to putting together my talking points for this podcast episode. And one of the things that the creators were really concerned about was whether or not they would be able to successfully build a show around Tariq, considering how hated he was as a character. Me personally, I'm really glad that they pushed through with this, because once Power ended, I probably stopped watching in season 4, season 5, and I had no interest in any of the Power books, so I did not watch it until recently, actually. So I binge watched Power Book 2, Power Book 3, and Power Book 4, and it was awesome. So I'm really glad that I went back and watched those shows. And so what I want to talk about today is just season 1 of Power Book 2. And so let's just go ahead and get into it. So in Power Book 2, we have new characters that we're introducing. We have the Tejadas, we have Lauren, we have Davis, we have Zeke, we have Jabari Reynolds, and we have Carrie. We also have some returning characters from the OG Power. We have Braden Weston, we have Effie, we have Tasha, we have Cooper, and it's just really great to see everything from Tariq's point of view and everything that he's going through, and just really seeing how all of these characters tie into what's going on. So off the jump, we have Tariq's inheritance. So his dad has died, and obviously he's super rich. What is left with his estate? And so in his will, he had a stipulation that Tariq cannot get his inheritance until he graduates from a 4-year university. So he's screwed right off the bat. His mother is on trial for murder, for committing Ghost's murder, and they basically have no money. I do want to talk about this a little bit just because I'm very interested in the idea of inheritance and what parents decide to pass down to their kids. So I know a lot of rich people, they will either give their kids just a little bit to live off of and kind of make them work for the rest, or they won't leave them anything, or they will leave them whatever they feel they should get, and it's actually a lot of money. And so I really don't like this idea of him forcing Tariq to go to a university and graduate, because in this, obviously I'm watching the show now, and it aired a couple of years ago, but I think that this point is still relevant. In today's culture, you don't really need a degree to be successful in life, and so I feel like this is a little bit outdated, because there are a lot of ways to be successful that don't require going to school or having a traditional career path. And so I know that for today, being that Tariq is 18, 19, and he's just starting college in this season, I know that right off the bat, we know that he can't use social media as a way to make money, because 1, that would take time to build, and then 2, it's getting his face out there, and as a drug dealer, that's not really what he wants. And so I think that is just interesting that even though Tariq is successful, I wouldn't say that Tariq himself is successful, but he comes from a successful and rich family, but he is so limited in his options as far as what he can do to get money that he has to go back to dealing drugs. And this is nothing like what he was doing back at his school when he was in high school. Everything that he does in season 1 of Power Book 2 is just completely next level. So, moving on to what he does in college. So he understands that in order to help fund his mom's defense, he needs to figure out how to make money. And so, obviously, we mentioned that one of the returning characters was Braden, and so that was someone that he dealt drugs with in high school. And so now they're together in college. They initially weren't roommates because Tariq, one of his stipulations of being accepted into Stansfield was that he had to tutor a basketball player named Zeke, and so he was naturally Zeke's roommate. And so obviously he rooms with Zeke for a little bit. He does papers for him and all of that stuff, but once he picks up the drugs full time and he's working with the Tejadas, he actually has to move out of his room with Zeke because Monet does not want him involved in that, and so he rooms with Braden, which makes it easier for them to do their business. And so one of the things that Tariq comes up with is he uses a connect that he has through his dad, which is, I think, a guy named Simon. I can't recall his last name at this point, but Simon is the one who got Tariq into Stansfield, and then Simon also has a really successful business. He's a rich man and powerful man himself, and so he has a husband, I believe. I cannot recall the husband's name at this point. I think it's Sebastian, but they call him Bash, something like that. Tariq goes to Bash and he's like, hey, I want to create this app. It's going to be tutoring. And so I'm really surprised by how quickly, obviously this is a TV show, but I'm really surprised by how quickly they were able to get that app together as far as like the coding and get it up and running and available to the people who need to purchase it. So I wish that everyone could have that type of access to be able to create apps for businesses that they want to create. And it was just really interesting for me to see that. I know the app was pretty basic. It did what they needed it to do. But I just think that it's really speaks to how powerful the St. Patrick family is, that they have all of these different connections that they can utilize and just kind of help them be successful in whatever it is they are doing. So now let's go into meeting the Tejadas. So Mary J. Blige. So I had actually seen memes of her on Power Book 2, but I didn't really know anything about the story. I just saw like funny memes and whatever. And so I think there was a lot of talk about her acting. People didn't like it. They said that she just delivered her lines and mean mugged the whole time and whatever. But me personally, I never knew that she could act, so it was surprising seeing her in that role. And it wasn't like she was a minor character like Lala. She's obviously an MTV VJ, so back in the day, hosting those music shows and all of that stuff. And so any role that I've seen her in, she's been like a minor character. So to have Mary J. Blige, someone I'm not familiar with as an actress, have basically not a leading role, but she gets a lot of screen time. And so, me personally, I really liked the way that she acted in Power Book 2. I thought that because she's an older woman, obviously, she was around in the 80s and the 90s and all of that stuff, she kind of brought that real-life gangster attitude that Monet's character really needed. And so, I honestly can't see anyone else playing that role. And when I say that, I'm thinking of like an older actress, like maybe Angela Bassett. Would she have been able to play that role? And so it's just really hard to, at this point, I've seen all 3 seasons, but it's really hard to see anybody else playing that character. So I think that she did a really great job. And I do want to point out that even though I like Mary J. Blige as an actress in this role, that doesn't mean that I didn't find that character super annoying. Monet was very, very annoying. And you'll see that as you continue watching season 1 and going into season 2 and 3. So the Tejadas. So let's talk about the children. So we have Kane, Drew, Diana, and then by extension we have Zeke, who is a cousin, and obviously we'll get into that later as you continue watching. So my personal favorite is Kane because I feel like he was true to who he was the whole time. He obviously was kind of like the soldier, and as far as his role in the drug operation, he was the one who killed people, who beat up people, and all of that stuff. He was the enforcer, and I feel like he was true to who he was because he not only did his job, but he also tried to figure out ways to better himself and to give himself more value to the organization. He definitely was always messing up. I wouldn't say that he was making the wrong decisions, but he was making them for the wrong reasons. He was very threatened by Tariq. He didn't like Tariq's role and how close he was getting to the family and the way that Monet came to rely on him. And one thing I want to point out about this is that I feel like Kane, in a sense, was really undervalued by that organization. I feel like everyone kept telling him that he was stupid, that he just needed to stay in his lane and beat people up because he was just dumb and didn't know what he was doing beyond that. And I feel like they really undervalued him, and I hope that as the show continues, going into like season 4 and 5 and all of that, that he really does get the come up that he deserves. So next, I want to talk about Drew. So Drew is like the second youngest son, and he's lighter skinned. So you have Kane, who's dark skinned, who looks black, and then you have Drew, who looks more Latino. So Monet herself is black, and then her husband Lorenzo is, I think he's Puerto Rican. He's some type of Hispanic, and so they have biracial children. Drew is kind of light skinned, and so he's seen as like the softer brother. He's the one that you send to college, and he is going to get a good education and a good corporate white-collar job, versus Kane, who's supposed to be in the streets and doing the dirty work. And so between the two brothers, Kane is obviously the one who is really in the street life. He should be the one who is leading the family when it comes to that. But Drew is actually the one who people are pushing to be the next leader after Lorenzo. And then we have Diana. Diana is the only girl of the Tejada family, and she, to me, is super annoying as the seasons progress, and I'm smiling when I say that because obviously I know it's coming, but she is not my favorite in terms of the 3 children. So that's all I'll say about her for now. And then we have Zeke. Zeke is a cousin of the family, so he kind of knows, I guess, like, so early on in the season, Zeke brings Tariq to a house party. There's obviously a bunch of black people there. It's in Queens. And then we have Kane, who's messing with some guy's girlfriend in the bathroom. And then that boyfriend ends up confronting Kane in the backyard of the party. And Kane jumps the guy, so the guy leaves and he comes back with a gun. So while this is happening, Monet tells Zeke to go back in the house because he's not involved. So Zeke should have some understanding that they are not necessarily bad people, but that their line of work is not on the up and up. And so Zeke, again, he's a cousin of the family. He's not really involved in the drug organization, but he is supposed to be a really good basketball player. And this is my one gripe with the show. I think that Zeke was horribly cast. This is not to necessarily talk bad about the actor, even though I don't really like him in this role. First of all, he was not a good basketball player at all. That was just obvious in every basketball scene that he had. I'm a huge One Tree Hill fan, and if you know the show, there's 2 brothers, Nathan and Lucas. Nathan actually is a basketball player in real life. He didn't go pro or anything like that, but he actually played in high school and he was good. The actor who played Lucas Scott is Chad Michael Murray or something like that. But anyway, he's a really successful actor, and he's was big in the early 2000s and going on. So that actor, Lucas Scott, that actor who played him was actually really bad at basketball, and he had to get a trainer on set to make him look more believable. And so I feel like Lucas Scott was a way better basketball player than Zeke, and I feel like for me, because I'm an athlete and I can pick up on when people are actually good at basketball and when they're not, they should have really worked with Zeke to get him better so that on camera it came across more realistically, because Zeke is supposed to be a top NBA draft pick, and what they're actually showing on camera doesn't even reflect that, so that just made it really unbelievable for me. And so I wish that they had found a better actor to play this role, just so that it felt like a more realistic option for the Tejadas and what's to come in later episodes in the season. And so I do feel like this character, Zeke, was the weakest part of the show for me, and I, again, wish that they had put someone else in this role. I'll also say that I didn't really buy him as a tough guy, and I don't necessarily mean that in terms of the drug organization. Obviously, you have to be a tough guy to be selling drugs or just even in that business, but also as a top NBA lottery pick, you also have to have some kind of confidence, some kind of swagger, cockiness that is a little bit more believable than what Zeke did. And so I think that they just missed the mark on this. So next, we're just going to move into the next topic. So we have initially what is a love triangle between Tariq, Lauren, and Diana. Effie is in the mix in that, but we'll not get to that just yet. So for now, I'm going to say that I really like Tariq with Lauren. I've been a fan of Paige Hurd since she did Cradle to the Grave with DMX, and so I don't think I've really seen her in anything else. I know that she did some TV show with the Wayne's brothers. I can't think of what it is, but I think it's the one that's based on Will Smith's family, if I'm correct. I just can't think of the name of the TV show, but anyway. So I really like seeing her in this role. She fit perfectly, and I actually think that her and Tariq make a better couple than Tariq and Diana. On camera, Tariq and Diana, they just didn't fit together, and I felt like they kind of kept forcing that chemistry that wasn't actually there. I think they would have been better as friends instead of a romantic interest. And then obviously going to Effie, she's someone that we know from OG Power, and they kind of have rocky history because she got him kicked out of school for dealing drugs. By him, I mean Tariq. And so she did that because she said it wasn't personal, just business. She actually needs money, and she deals drugs or sells drugs to survive, whereas Tariq, yes, his family depends on the drug trade, but he doesn't need money the way that she does. And so they have a rocky history, and that should be a huge red flag going into season 1, the rest of season 1, season 2, and season 3. So be on the lookout to see how that plays out. And so next we're going into Zeke and Carrie, but first I want to talk about Carrie and Jabari. So Carrie and Jabari are professors at Stansfield. They are both black, and they used to date. And so we know that they are kind of in an awkward phase of their relationship. Jabari obviously wants to get back together, and Carrie is kind of on the fence of what she wants to do as far as being with him or not being with him. They kind of have a push-pull relationship. So she feels like every time she goes back to him, things are good, and he's just pulling her back in, and then when they break up, she has to deal with the fallout and all of that. And so what we know from their relationship is that Jabari had a successful book, and he actually based that book on their relationship, and she wasn't happy about the way that he did that, so that is one of the reasons why they broke up. And then we also find out that Carrie is mad because Jabari is sleeping with one of his TAs. And so this kind of naturally leads us into Carrie and Zeke, because Carrie is Zeke's, she's Zeke's advisor. So she meets with him frequently just to make sure that he's doing okay as far as staying on top of his academics and making sure that he's eligible to play basketball, because at this point his grades are so bad that he actually can't play, and so that is why Tyreek is tutoring him. So he has all these people staying on top of him and helping him to make sure that he's eligible to play basketball, I think, in the second half of the season, if not early on in the first half of the basketball season. So what we learned from season 1 is that Carrie is a total hypocrite because she's obviously sleeping with Zeke after she just got mad at Jabari for sleeping with his TA, and this makes Carrie a huge liability for Zeke and the Tejada family, as we'll see in later episodes of this season. So how I want to tie that relationship into everything else that's happening in Power Book 2 is that we know from early on that Kane is obsessed with Tyreek. He hates the way that he has come into the family and kind of has say and power right away, basically. And so Kane ends up having someone from GTG, which is a gang of sorts that work for or with the Tejada family. And so I'm going to say that they work for the Tejada family because they, I guess, get the drugs from the Tejada family, and they have to follow the Tejada family's rules and stuff like that for how to conduct themselves. So they have one person in the GTG gang, Little Guap, whose father ran that gang but is in prison. He goes wild on social media, and so the Tejada family doesn't like that, and so they have to just kind of put them in line and all of that. So anyway, Kane uses someone from that gang to try to kill Tyreek, and so the guy, there's a basketball game, everyone is dressed up in paint and just like in the school spirit, so this guy's able to easily sneak into the building because he has his face painted. And interestingly, you can see that Tyreek kind of notices this guy right away. When the guy comes into the school, he has to go through the metal detector, and he has a shank on him or a knife on him that doesn't set off the detectors. But Tyreek is also standing by the entrance, and so he notices the guy. They make eye contact, or they don't necessarily make eye contact. The guy who's there to kill him kind of is like avoiding him, but Tyreek clearly notices him. And so at some point, Tyreek is he's waiting there for somebody. I think it's 2-Bit, because he has to pay 2-Bit money for something that Ghost did in the OG Power, which I can't recall. But anyway, so Tyreek goes to sit with the Tejada family to watch the basketball game, and then he is obviously waiting to meet with 2-Bit, and he just asks the family if they want something because he's going to the concession stand. He's not really going there, but he's going to try to get away so that he can meet the person that he's meeting at that same time. And so he realizes as he's walking away that same person that he noticed early on in the episode is following him, and so he's just speeding up, and then eventually he's running, and he goes to the pool, and he's basically trapped at the pool. And so they get into a little fight, and then 2-Bit, I don't know where 2-Bit comes from, but he ends up coming to Tyreek's rescue, and he basically drowns the guy in the pool. And so what they do is they take the phone off of that guy, they take a picture of a dead guy in the pool, and they send it to Kane. And so Kane's like, okay, great, job's done. And then the next thing you know, Tyreek comes walking back down the stands to sit down with him, and Kane is freaking out because he doesn't know who that is in the pool. And I think at this point he knows who that is in the pool and that the plan backfired, but Tyreek doesn't know that Kane was involved in what was happening. So because they have a dead kid in the pool at this prestigious university, this opens up an investigation, and Carrie gets involved with the investigation. And so I think prior to that basketball game that we just talked about, Zeke and Carrie had an interaction outside that Monet witnessed, and I don't know that you could have picked up on the fact that they were intimate or whatever, but Monet picked up on it, and she ends up later on threatening Carrie to basically stop seeing Zeke and to keep her mouth shut about what she knows as far as the dead kid in the pool. So because at this point, Carrie starts to do a lot more research to figure out what's going on. We have we just have other names coming up in the investigation, and that just leads to more trouble for the Tejada family, Tariq, and Kay. So, I mentioned Jabari earlier when I started talking about Zeke, Carey, and Jabari, and so just to tie up what happened with Jabari, so he ends up getting killed because of a meeting that he had with Tariq in the park. Prior to this, he was super involved in the investigation. He ended up following Tariq a few times because he thought that Tariq was involved with Carey, so he was just really jealous and obsessed with Tariq. And he ended up finding out enough information to be able to put together a book about what was happening on campus at Sandsfield, and he was basing that book on Tariq's character. And so, obviously, I think at some point, I wasn't 100% sure about this, but it actually looks like Jabari is stealing words from his student's paper to write his book. So that's another angle that's interesting because it's not that he's not doing his own work, but he's really using other people to build his stories and then make money off of that story like he did with Carey. So, anyway, Jabari figures out that Tariq is doing drugs and all of that. He calls him into his office and says, hey, I'm writing a book on you, basically. Is this okay? And then somehow they make it a transactional agreement because at this point, I think Tariq still needs money for his mom. So he's like, okay, this is cool as long as you pay me. So they end up meeting in the park. And Kane at this point, he knows that Tariq got one up on the dead guy who's in the pool. And then, so now he's following him to see what he's doing. And Kane overhears Jabari and Tariq talking about Drew because Drew's name came up in one of the investigations. He is seeing a guy named Everett, and after the guy ended up dead in the pool, Zeke, Everett, and I think Drew, they got jumped as they left the club, and Drew was the one who stopped it, and so Everett, for whatever reason, mentions Drew, and so Jabari is aware of Drew's name, and obviously we know what Drew represents as far as his name being brought up in that investigation, and so Kane overhears them talking about Drew. He doesn't really know what they're talking about, and he shoots Jabari in the shoulder, and so then Tariq and Kane have a conversation, and they're just talking about what's going on, and Tariq is trying to convince him that he's not ratting them out because that's what Kane thinks. He thinks that he's basically starting out the Tejada family, which is not the case. And so Tariq says, okay, I'm gonna finish him off. You're gonna go away, and none of this is gonna come back on us because we're gonna frame this other person. So earlier on in the season, find out the Tejada family that they have a cop on their payroll named Ramirez, and Monet is actually sleeping with his cop. And so, for whatever reason, I actually think it's because Monet isn't really telling anybody about her intimate relationships with Ramirez, and so that's why Kane just thinks that, okay, this is just someone who works for us, he needs to do what we say, and blah, blah, blah. And so Kane goes to Ramirez for help on something, and then Ramirez ends up confronting him, and then Kane shoots him for whatever reason. I can't recall what the reason is, but he shoots him. I do want to mention that prior to this, Ramirez had gotten Kane out of other police-related stops or whatever. So he was stopped one time when he had Braden and Trace in his car, and Trace stole drugs out of Braden's room that the Tejada family had given Braden and Tariq. And so Kane comes looking for Tariq. He finds Braden there and Trace there. They're fighting over something. And then Kane realizes that they don't have his money and they don't have his drugs. So he takes Braden and Trace and he makes them sell in the corner. Obviously, Braden does a great job. He gets rid of everything that is in his bag. And then Trace he's trying to talk his way out of getting jumped. He gets jumped, and then they have to go save him and all that. And so Kane gets caught with them in his car, and obviously Brady is a Western, so they're a really rich and powerful family. If the cops just see their names, they get off of whatever they were about to be charged with, and so Kane getting caught with them in his car is a really bad look. And so anyway, even after all that Ramirez has done to help him, Kane still shoots Ramirez, and so he has to bury his body, and he just dumps him in it looks like a pond or something like that. And so when he's at this moment with Tariq, I think at this point Tariq knows that Kane killed Ramirez, so Tariq comes up with a plan to basically say that Ramirez killed Jabari, and then Ramirez killed himself or whatever. So that happened, and then now we are able to get to my favorite part of the season, which is Tasha's court case when Tariq is on the stand. So we have all of this other stuff going on that I just talked about. Just as a refresher, we have Tasha, who is on trial for killing Ghost. Throughout the season, she goes through two lawyers. She has Tamika, and then she has Davis. So Tamika is a female lawyer who Tasha initially hired, or who Tariq initially hired, and Tamika is able to figure out early on who Tasha is protecting, and it's Tariq, and so she's trying to get Tasha a deal or something like that, and Tasha, in order to get that deal, she has to tell the truth, and she isn't going to tell the truth, she's going to lie, and so that's going to get Tamika in trouble, and so Tamika is just pressing her on telling the truth, and then she figures out that it's Tariq or somebody else that she's protecting, and so Tasha ends up firing Tamika because she just knows too much. So Tamika and Tariq have a conversation about this, and this leads Tariq to need to find another lawyer, which is Davis. Initially, he tries to get Davis to take on his mother's case, but he needs, I think, $500,000 up front just to even get a conversation with him, basically. And so what Tariq does is he uses Zeke's social media account to go live and basically announce that Davis is taking his mom's case. So this forces Davis to the table to take on the case and just at least do some initial investigating to figure out what he can do for Tasha. And so we also have Cooper Sachs in the mix. He's from OG Power, and he's trying to help Tasha get free because Tariq is basically blackmailing him because he saw him at the club the night of Ghost's shooting, and he wasn't supposed to be there, and Cooper also had a gun. And so Cooper is basically working secretly to get Tasha freed, but he's also getting himself into legal trouble as well, as far as what he's sharing with Tamika and then just what he's doing at his job. And so Cooper is able to get the local charges dropped against Tasha, but then his boss, he has two people who are above him, and they both are affiliated with the Democratic Party, and they don't want Ghost's history of criminal past to come out, and so they're basically trying to do everything that they can to keep that quiet, and so they want Tasha charged as the queenpin, even though everybody knows that she was not running the organization. And so Cooper gets the DA, Jenny Sullivan, to drop the charges against Tasha, but then he basically turns around and charges Tasha in the federal court, and so now he's prosecuting the case, which puts him in a perfect position for what's about to happen. And so while we have this happening, Cooper and Davis are basically working together to basically try to end the case in a way that works for both of them. They obviously want to get Tasha off, but Cooper has to throw the case in a way that it looks like he's not throwing the case. And so he's just losing left and right, and his boss is not happy. And so his boss is on him to get a win. And then so this leads to Cooper calling Tariq as a witness, so he has to testify. So this backfires. So just to give you a little bit of a backstory. So earlier on in the season, Cooper knows that Tariq is up to something, so he has his niece who was arrested for doing something, and she was brought to him instead of like being arrested. And so he has her follow Tariq around, and he tells her like, don't speak to him, don't get too close and all that, but she doesn't listen. And so she goes to a party that Tariq and Brayden are at, and she's getting way too close. She's talking to Brayden, she's talking to Tariq, she's taking pictures and all of this stuff. And so at some party, she's obviously getting really friendly with Brayden, and at some party she tries to drug Brayden so that he will be more likely to talk about Tariq, because she's been asking questions and he's like not answering them. And so Brayden and Tariq end up switching drinks, and so Tariq gets drugged. He ends up going upstairs to the upstairs bedroom at the party that he's at, and it happens to be Tracy's room. And so I think there's someone in there with Tariq at first, but that person leaves, and then Riley comes in, and she's going through Tariq's phone, and we find out later on in the episode or in the season that what she did was she basically like Find My phone, so like you can track where someone is. And so she does that. She leaves the room, and Trace sees her coming out, so he thinks that they're sleeping together. And so this creates issues between Tariq and Brayden, because Brayden doesn't believe that Riley is dirty and whatever. And so at this court case where Tariq is on the stand, he ends up flipping all of this on Cooper, and he basically is like, you know, you're the one who's dirty, how did you know where I was? And one of the things that happened when Tariq was drugged was that he ended up going to his father's grave, and he was saying stuff that would sort of be like a confession. And so he brings her stuff and says, you know, you had my drink drugged, you had someone follow me, how did you know where I was, how were you able to get this video? And so the judge isn't happy about this, and so they end up going to the chambers, and they go to the chambers, and whoever Cooper Saxer's boss is, he's the one running things. So they kick the judge out. They say, hey, this is what's going to happen. We're going to give you this deal, Cooper. You're going to resign, and you're going to make up a reason. You got outsmarted by this kid here. And so basically the deal is for Tasha to say that Tommy killed Ghost, and then she's going to go into witness protection, and then we get the end of the season, and we go into season 2. So I hope that was a great recap for you guys, and I also shared some of my personal opinions about the show. And if you haven't watched Power yet, I definitely, or Powerverse rather, I definitely recommend checking it out and just giving it a try and letting me know what you think. And thank you for listening to this podcast. Bye.